All right, I'm Chris Savannah with American Outdoor News. We're here with Bill Sack from the Second Amendment Foundation. Bill, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate your time.
You bet, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Now, there's a lot of things going on with the Second Amendment, obviously, and especially now with the new they're not so new, the red flag laws that they're refining to take away our gun rights. What's your opinion on
Yeah.
that?
Well, our opinion is obviously in opposition to red flag laws. The red flag laws have certainly been something that we've seen uh, be a hot topic, and certainly kind of the one of the new hot prospects that the gun controllers think is a means by which that they can restrict people's rights and disenfranchise individuals. And we've seen them, kind of propagate all over the country. Unfortunately, our current presidential administration is very supportive of the idea of red flag laws. They've, set up a national resource center for red flag laws, amongst other things. And, as I think we'll talk about further, this afternoon, these red flag laws just present a whole host of constitutional problems.
Well, let's take a step back and say exactly what the red flag law is. I mean, basically, if your neighbor, family member, or somebody at your school thinks you're a threat and knows you own firearms, they could basically call the authorities and they could come in and take the firearms without provocation.
Right. So, the red flag laws, they do vary pretty widely across jurisdictions, across state to state, but
True.
pretty much what they all are, kind of as a overarching umbrella category, is a set of laws that allow for the preemptive search and seizure of someone's firearms, as well as making them a prohibited person, at least for a temporary period of time, with very limited due process, if any. Usually it's based on an ex parte hearing where the individual is not present, and doesn't find out that anything has taken place until law enforcement shows up at their door to take their guns away. So they're definitely problematic on multiple levels.
So it's not only an infringement of your right to bear arms, it's an infringement on your constitutional rights on many different levels. Like you just mentioned, search and seizure, illegal search and seizure. It infringes on that right as well.
Yeah, the idea really turns a lot of traditional notions of procedural due process on their head, where typically the way things are supposed to work in this country is you get a hearing, you get an opportunity to be heard, to face your accuser, to cross-examine witnesses, and then there is a decision upon which your rights might be restricted. Red flag laws kind of work in the opposite, where with much less procedural due process and often very concerningly low burdens of proof, individuals have their rights taken away, and then they're put in a position where they then need to show up in court to try to get their rights back, which is just not how things are supposed to work in this country.
So it basically takes away your right to prove your innocence or have your day in court. It's just you're guilty until proven innocent instead of the other way around.
In a matter of speaking, yes.
So this actually affects you Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, as well as your 14th Amendment.
Yeah, all of the above. So from a Second Amendment perspective, there are really no historical analogs to red flag laws. Red flag laws are a brand new creation. So when you're looking at the Second Amendment, the current Second Amendment test, which is the test that Heller created and Bruen in the Bruen case back in June of 2022 reiterated, there has to be a historical analog, or there has to be historical regulations in the historical tradition of the country from around the time of the ratification that support this sort of gun control. So from a Second Amendment perspective, red flag laws just fail the Bruin and Heller test, like on their face.
Mhm.
So they pretty clearly violate the Second Amendment. From a Fourth Amendment perspective, what we're used to in the Fourth Amendment is, protection from search and seizure,
Mhm.
the requirements of needing to get a warrant.
Yeah.
Um, and because this is red flag laws are a civil enforcement mechanism, the burdens of proof are low, often shockingly low.
Yeah.
And it allows individuals to show up and have their property searched and seized, and not just their property, but their constitutionally protected property. This is a fundamental right that's at stake here, and the burdens of proof are shockingly low. So the Fourth Amendment concerns are pretty high, and then from a Fifth and Sixth Amendment perspective, without having the procedural due process and without having the ability to have a lawyer present or a lawyer provided for you, there are all sorts of avenues for abuse, disproportionate abuses of power, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of problems present.
So you're basically the Sixth Amendment, you're being prosecuted as a criminal without being proven that you are a criminal.
Right, right. I mean, and if you think about, how the court system works, if anyone has been involved in any sort of civil or criminal trial, you know darn well that you want to have an attorney present. And the
Oh,
folks that show up to these things without an attorney present do so at their peril. And, because again, these red flag proceedings are civil proceedings, not criminal proceedings, there is no Sixth Amendment right to an attorney. The government does not have to provide attorney for you. So what does that mean? It means that individuals who can't afford a private attorney are going to be much more vulnerable to being abused and being retaliated against by some sort of abusive manipulation of these statutes. And unfortunately, people that have the money to fight them will be able to, and the people that don't will be subject to having their rights taken away.
well, I am in New York, so, uh, will somebody who's arrested for red flag laws will probably remain in jail, but you could rob a bank and be let out on the street the next day.
Unfortunately, that seems to be the way things go these days, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's, the rights are in the hands of the people who don't abide by the law. People who do are prosecuted. Uh, and if you speak out against it, does that affect your First Amendment?
Right. Well, that's another question, that's implicated in these red flag laws is, in some of them, constitutionally protected conduct, like First Amendment conduct, like, certain protected types of speech, other Second Amendment protected conduct, like the recent purchase of a firearm, are considered evidence against you. Um, it can be considered evidence against you in a red flag proceeding. So there are multiple problems with these things, and we have currently here at Second Amendment Foundation undertaken a pretty wide initiative that we're calling Capture the Flag, which is going after these red flag laws in multiple jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So we're currently interested. We've targeted about 6 jurisdictions where the red flag laws are particularly egregious, and we're going after them in the court systems and actively looking for additional plaintiffs to be able to continue to do so, to try to get these things knocked down and start having the courts regain some sanity over this issue.
So here we are in a position where they're trying to basically take your ability to own a firearm without provocation, stomp on your constitutional rights on many different levels, but yet you have illegals pouring against across the border who all of a sudden have the right to purchase a firearm. So how do we protect ourselves against somebody who is potentially dangerous, being able to purchase a gun where they're tying our hands as an American citizen?
I mean, I think that's a really interesting issue. And so you're referring to a recent court decision that came to the conclusion that illegal immigrants have Second Amendment rights,
Correct.
correct? So, the question as to whether constitutional rights more broadly apply to illegal aliens is a complicated question, but in the context of multiple other rights, the courts have repeatedly found that individuals that are under the jurisdiction of the United States, who are physically here, do have constitutional rights, and certainly the core fundamental constitutional rights. And so the finding that the Second Amendment applies to individuals that are also, physically here, is consistent with the idea that they also have First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, Fourth Amendment rights. Now, go ahead.
Well, I was always of the belief that, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is what I learned when I was in school way back when. If you are not an American citizen, our Constitution is not afforded to somebody who's not a citizen. Right or wrong?
That's actually the courts have held repeatedly that that's not the case. There are certain rights that specifically are reserved for citizens. For example, voting. But there are a number of rights that are discussed in the Constitution that are given to quote unquote the people. And so the question has arisen, who are the people? And in many instances, the courts have held that the people are basically anyone that is physically residing within the United States, whether or not they're a citizen. And there are certain protections that, while the gun issue and whether or not illegal immigrants should have Second Amendment rights is certainly like an emotionally fraught issue. And I understand the concern that you raise here. In other constitutional contexts, I think the importance of making sure that individuals that are here that do have constitutional rights, I think is pretty clear. I mean, we would not want, individuals who are living in the States to, be able to have illegal search and seizure of their property just because the cops want to knock on their door and kick their door in. They should have the same protections. They should be able to, make the same free speech. They should have the right to protest because they are here. That's what the courts have held over and over again is that citizenship affords certain specific rights, but more broadly, many of the fundamental rights, if not all of them, apply to anybody who has jurisdiction within the United States.
So how do you run a nexus check, background check on somebody who's not a citizen, does not have a social security number, cannot present a birth certificate, is not a citizen? How do we run a background check on them? How do we know who these people are? They could be a terrorist. They could be a murderer in the country of origin. They could be fleeing prosecution from where they came from. That's
a great question. It's a great question, Chris. And yeah, and that recent court decision raised a whole lot of questions exactly like the ones that you're raising. Which are, we have a system in place that does require in many instances the pass of an ex background check in order to be able to purchase a firearm. Although not all, there are, we don't have universal background checks in this country, and for good reason. As I'm sure you're aware, a universal background check system is the same thing as a gun registry. Which is, not only a terrible idea, unconstitutional, but also prohibited by federal statute. But it does raise very serious and significant questions as to the practical applications of the current federal gun laws and state laws that we have on the books. But notably, how how do we make a background check system work if there are individuals who fall outside of that system? It's a great question. And at the moment, Chris, we just don't have an answer. We don't know. The system has not fully worked through the logistics and the practical application of that decision.
You know what? My opinion, call me ignorant, call me racist, call me whatever the hell you want. I don't believe that if you are not a citizen, you should be able to purchase a firearm. If you were not born in the United States, you should not be able to hold office. That's just my opinion. You know, you get somebody who comes over, becomes a citizen, they're able to hold office, and they're bringing their luggage or baggage with them and forcing them on us, as we see today.
It's definitely a complicated and difficult issue, that's for sure.
So I just see that as a trickle-down effect on many different levels. And it affects us as citizens. It affects us as law-abiding citizens, as gun owners, as basic American inalienable rights.
I certainly understand your perspective, and you know there are certainly competing perspectives on this question. One thing that I'll provide just as kind of food for thought, you know, on this question of, you know, we have at Second Amendment Foundation and in the Second Amendment advocacy community, kind of more broadly, really made an active point to move away from using the term law abiding, and we've shifted over to the term peaceable. And so we'd like to talk about peaceable individuals having their right to keep and bear arms and not law abiding. And the reason there is, as I'm sure you know, we are over policed to death in this country. And there are so many statutes on the books, and very frequently, especially us as gun owners, we know that what is lawful today can be seemingly at the flip of a switch be unlawful the next day. You know, when we're looking at issues like bump stocks or pistol braces or things like that, you know, when you want to talk about law-abiding citizens, well, guess what? You know, depending on what the most recent ATF decision is, whether or not you have a pistol brace on your AR pistol, either makes you law-abiding or not. We're very sensitive about this idea that law-abiding individuals are the only ones that should have their right to keep and bear arms, because we think as long as you're not dangerous, as long as you don't present a danger to yourself, to the community, to other individuals, that you have a right to defend yourself and to do that effectively. And what that means is to be able to keep and bear arms. So the reason I bring this up, this distinction between peaceable and law-abiding, is, and many people don't realize this, but coming into the country illegally at this point is only a misdemeanor. So it's not a felony. And you know that we can take out the policy implications of that and whether or not that's good or bad, but just as a statement of fact, coming into the country illegally at this point is a misdemeanor. It's a low-level crime. So do we want to create the precedent that individuals that are guilty of misdemeanors don't have a right to keep and bear arms? Because once we go down that road and the anti-gunners can latch on to that, well, think about how many other thousands of misdemeanors there are out there that they would love to say, well, if this misdemeanor justifies taking away your guns, then so do all of these others. So it is a difficult legal issue. And you know, obviously we don't want, you know, dangerous individuals. We don't want people who have you know, disloyalty to the United States or to the ideals that you know we all hold dear, or you know, the idea that we all have our fundamental protected rights and that people have, you know, the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Like, you know, individuals need to believe these things. But from a legal perspective, it does raise additional complicated issues that we are continuing to work through from a policy perspective, and that the courts are going to be chewing on, I think, for a long time.
Well, I mean, getting back to the red flag laws here, being in New York, they made it illegal to own a semi-automatic weapon, which isn't just an AR, it's a hunting rifle, it's a shotgun, um, a
It's
Ruger,
95% of all modern firearms.
yeah,
Yep.
a Ruger 22. You use it to plink around and do some target shooting. Illegal. Um, now, if an individual owns one, a 22, for instance, and your neighbor says, hey, he owns a semi-automatic weapon. Again, red flag laws. They could come into your house and they're not just going to confiscate your 22, they're going to confiscate everything.
Well, the red flag laws present even kind of broader problems than that. I mean, whether or not you own firearms that are non-compliant with your state laws, as egregious as those might be, and
Yeah.
I will point out that we currently have a great lawsuit in federal court in New York called Lane, which is challenging the assault weapons ban in New York, challenging the New York Safe Act. So we are fighting the good fight for you guys there in New York. But even more broadly, they don't even need to allege to have you red flag that you own anything illegal. They can say, hey, Chris has been acting erratic. Chris, Chris yelled at me for parking in his driveway yesterday, and I didn't like the way that he looked at me. And I know that that guy has a podcast about guns, and that scares me. And I think you guys could, I think he might do something crazy. And in some instances that can be enough.
Yeah.
So something that can be a relatively innocuous beef with a neighbor or marital or other sorts of family domestic disputes can very quickly be escalated, and people's rights can be weaponized against them.
Sure.
And unfortunately, these red flag laws, they just represent very frequently a weaponization of the system against individuals. And they're also unnecessary and redundant when it comes to actually preventing crime, because we have other laws on the books that take care of these concerns.
Well, here's a term that they love to use: common sense gun laws. Aren't there enough gun laws on the books? I mean, there's not a new gun law that somebody's going to miraculously come up with. It's going to change anything. There are so many gun laws on the books that should make things easier on everybody all around.
Yeah, well, look, we all know that the common sense gun law thing is just a clever use of language to make it sound like that only people who are, smart and righteous and on the right side of history are going to agree with gun control because they're common sense. And who wants to be on the opposite side of common sense?
Yep.
But of course, we know that pretty much always, with most gun control, the practical application, the actual mechanics of how these things are supposed to work fall apart upon any sort of critical inspection, and pretty much reduced down to kind of a feeling of emotion. Well, we have to do something, Chris. We have to do something. So doing something bad to somebody else is just as good as doing nothing, apparently.
Yeah.
And but look, that's why Second Amendment Foundation's job is so critical, and why we've been around for 50 years. We're celebrating our 50-year anniversary this year.
Wow.
We're currently involved in like 60 active pieces of litigation all across the country, in federal and state courts. And over the course of our history, we've had over 250 court cases. So there's no shortage of bad ideas coming out of states like New Jersey and California and Connecticut and your home state, of New York, that keep us busy. Although we're really pleased with the progress that we're making. Those that have been paying attention, the momentum is on our side. So we've got to, just keep our foot planted on the pedal, keep the pedal down, and things are going to continue to get better for us. We just got to keep the eye on the ball.
How do people find out more about the Second Amendment Foundation and what you actually do?
Sure. So our website, which is new and improved, we've got a brand new website this year for our 50th anniversary, is saf.org. So SAF.org. You can find out about all the active cases, all of our educational materials, all of our history, as well as, how to join, how to donate, how to become a member. On the website, we're active on all of the socials. We're on Instagram as Second Amendment Foundation. We're on Twitter as 2AFDN for Foundation. We're also on LinkedIn and on a couple of the other things, but we're on all the major socials. Just search for Second Amendment Foundation and you'll find us.
And how do people get involved with you guys?
Yeah, so there are lots of ways of getting involved. The easiest and most obvious way is to join and become a member. Our membership dues are really approachable. You get, to be an annual member, which affords you all of the benefits of being a member, which, as our astute listeners are aware, and it does have some application and some preliminary injunctions on certain cases, which applied to staff members specifically. So if you wanted protection from certain federal prosecution, being a member was important for a while. So you can become a member. You can also just donate if you're not interested in becoming a member, or you can do both. There are multiple different ways of donating. You can do one-time donations. You can do regular reoccurring monthly donations, which are great and which we love our members that do that. And then there are also ways that you can donate out into the future. We have a planned giving program, which is a great program that allows you to give all or part of your estate, to Second Amendment Foundation, as a way of kind of, ensuring and moving your legacy forward, and making sure that the next generations of Americans are able to enjoy the rights that we still have today.
Well, organizations like the Second Amendment Foundation are so important to our heritage. And there's more organizations that try to do what you do, but you've really pushed your way to the forefront and really fighting the good fight to keep our rights. And we appreciate it.
We certainly appreciate that. Yeah, we consider ourselves blessed every day to be able to do what we do. I consider myself very lucky personally to be able to, fight for something every day that I believe so strongly in. We've got plenty of fight ahead of us, and we're happy to be able to do what we do for the good people.
Well, we definitely appreciate what you do. Take a look at the website. You want to join, you want to get involved. It's encouraged. Go to the website, check it out. You could feel free to subscribe to our channel as well. Your support always is welcomed here as well at American Outdoor News. So thank you again for your time, Bill. I appreciate you talking to us and enlightening us on everything going on today. And we hope to see you again soon.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it. Yeah, be happy to come back.